So what I'm going to teach you guys next is actually how to perform a proper stroke, and the stroke is actually a really important part of your shot, because even if you're doing everything else right and you're pocketing balls, it's really hard to take your game to the next step if you don't have a really good stroke, because you won't be able to control the cue ball and what it sort of does. So we'll start with actually, before we even look at stroking and hitting balls, we're just going to look at what your body should be doing while you're stroking, and yeah, we'll just start from there. I'll demonstrate sort of what my stroke looks like. It's just nice and smooth, nice and slow there. And the first thing you probably notice is that none of my body is moving. The only part of my body moving right now is, well, my head, because I'm talking to you guys, and also just everything in my lower shooting arm. And that's really important, because like we were discussing in the stance lessons, the more you shift about and stuff, the more you're gonna screw up your aim there. So yeah, just make sure you're nice and still, and actually think of your stroke as a pendulum. And what that means is there's one pivoting point, and below that pivoting point everything just swings back and forth nice and smooth. Yeah, that's totally true about your stroke. And another thing you guys should notice too is that it's not actually my entire arm that's moving, it's just my lower arm. And that's probably a misconception that a lot of beginner players have, is that they think the shooting motion is an entire arm motion, but really it isn't. It's only a lower arm movement, and you want to actually keep your upper arm as still as possible as well. If you think about the pivoting point of your pendulum, it should be in your elbow, not your shoulder, and that'll help you too. Right? So just nice and smooth, everything else nice and still, like that. And yeah, you'll notice also that my wrist just moves fluidly with whatever my forearm is doing, and also that my grip actually is it's pretty loose there, and you don't really want to grip this cue super tight. That makes it a lot more difficult to, it actually makes it harder to control, because it's not as forgiving. So you just want to be nice and loose, just like this. Just nice and smooth like that. And also you should note that you can't see from this angle, but actually my arm is perpendicular to the table, and that's going to help, because if it's not perpendicular, it's going to, if you're swinging sideways or something, your cue is going to take some weird curves and whatever. So you want to make sure it's 90 degrees with the table here. And yeah, that should help you have a nice, straight, smooth stroke there. Okay, so let's just lay out some balls here really quickly to demonstrate maybe what a good stroke might look like. Ooh. Yeah, probably one of the things you got from the beginning of this video is that you want to have a nice smooth stroke, and with a smooth stroke, that means there's going to be a nice follow through. You definitely don't want your stroke looking like you're stabbing at this cue ball here, because really, if you think about when we were talking about aim, we were always aiming at this point, right? Where the ghost ball is, and not actually at the cue ball. The cue ball is just a means to an end, right? So if you think about it like that, it completely makes sense, because why would you aim at something here but just stop here? You probably want to get to that point as much as possible, right? And that'll help promote a nice follow through. The only real time you want to ever just sort of stab at this ball is if you're doing a stop shot, which we won't cover, but that's just something to keep in mind. Normally you do want to follow through, even if you're doing a draw shot. Yeah, so just have a nice follow through there. It's actually one of my pet peeves when players stab at the ball like this, really hard. And actually, for a lot of beginner players, they tend to do that a lot when they're taking these long shots here, that they think they have to make a really hard shot, and they torque their arm really hard, and they generate all this extra power, and they just stab this ball, and that's totally untrue. That'll really screw up what the ball actually does after it bounces off the tip. So yeah, just if you want to actually take like a harder shot, all you have to do is pull your bridge back a bit and follow through even more, and that just promotes a longer stroke, which drives the ball a bit more. It's a nice, good way to get a solid contact on the ball. So yeah, just remember, if you're taking these nice fluid, smooth strokes here, another thing your cue is going to do is it's going to sort of dip at the end. If you notice, my cue just sort of dives right at the end of its sort of extension there. It just does that naturally, because if you follow through as much as possible, like where your arm ends up, it's just gonna drive the cue down a bit. Yeah, so that's another good way to see if you're following through enough. You'll just take that nice little dive there. It'll be nice and smooth. Okay. Another tip I can give you guys is actually, it has to do with all this stuff, which is bad. Your warm-up strokes, kind of think about them as like golf warm-up strokes, if any of you play golf. You want to actually be warming up your stroke so that when you take your actual shot, it's exactly the same. And when you're taking your warm-up strokes, make sure the tip of your cue is actually just about to touch where you want to contact the cue ball, and that's actually the only time you want to look at the cue ball, right? Other times we're always aiming at that ghost ball down there. So yeah, make sure you take your warm-up strokes nice and slow. Keep it at the same pace that you're gonna take your real stroke at, because why change your real stroke at the last minute if you just took all this time doing these nice slow smooth warm-up strokes, right? So make sure, yeah, you're consistent with your warm-up strokes and your actual stroke. None of this and then actually taking the shot like and then having a nice shot. That just changes everything and defeats the whole purpose of having the warm-up strokes there, right? So yeah, once you're all ready for that, once you're set, yeah, all that's left to do is just hit the ball. So take those nice warm-up strokes and make sure you have that same consistent stroke throughout.